You all waiting for me?
Always. I am. She was amazing the last meeting.
Oh, I can't wait.
The pressure's on.
Yeah.
What time it is?
Alicia said she's going to another group, is that right?
Yes. Oh, good.
Yeah.
So we swapped out.
Are we ready? I think so. It's all over again, huh?
Groundhog's Day.
How about the implementation? The local scoring seems to be high on the list. You know what the current requirement is for local scoring? What the language is about?
I was just about to ask what,
Mhm.
I mean, does anyone do that and what the process to go through? Because when I think of local scoring, I think of fast.
I was gonna say, yeah, we do local scoring, but we have to.
If anyone who's not part of fast.
There used to be a requirement for it, and I don't know.
There isn't anymore, not in TPA.
I wonder when and why it changed.
I'm not sure there ever was.
Hmm.
For TPA, that's the only one I know about.
Yeah, Cal TPA, I know about
I
it.
don't think there was ever a requirement for local scoring.
Yeah.
There's a recommendation that
There
you,
was was it just sort of like you should try to use local scoring or something like that? Was that the language?
I've never heard of local scoring being done before.
Pat did.
I just want to step back. Look, I was really interested in the fact that along these so-called recommendations, so-called meaning I didn't necessarily participate in developing them, but I am a little bit troubled by it. That faculty implementation right now is seen primarily as a problem of local scoring. I guess it is in the sense that faculty would be responsible for local scoring. Is that the idea that they would be responsible rather than staff or coordinators or people who are hired to do scoring? There are many models for the local scoring piece. It could be faculty, could be lecturers, could be tenure track, could be staff, could be coordinator positions hired by deans with committees, perhaps. So I just start with like, that's nice, but I don't know what that means.
no, I
That's
agree.
the major question.
Um,
I mean,
But maybe instead of using that term of local scoring, we should start with, who do we think should be doing scoring? You know?
Well, it's the use of that word faculty, because there's not
Yeah.
one single faculty that's at Stanford that would ever touch it. So
Looking forward to talking about
Never
that in a
has.
minute.
never had.
So
then
the
how
who
much
question.
conflict of interest and bias will there be?
Right. So maybe we should just reframe a little bit, the scoring culture, the scoring agents, the scoring people, the assessors, whoever they are. It's not just about local, it's about who is doing what, where.
Well, I'll pause for a second. I'm
Yeah.
assuming no one in this group developed these recommendations or parts of these recommendations.
What do you mean develop them?
Or, because we know when we came up with the recommendation,
I don't remember
we were
seeing
the
this.
ones
We
listing.
wrote some of these.
Right, so my question is, if you were part of that group that wrote these, what was meant by local scoring? If anyone knows.
These weren't the things from what we wrote in groups, were they? These were the
That's what I
things that we wrote on the Google.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, on the Google
Right,
sheet
that's part of
that
our
we did
homework.
individually,
Yep,
that we did
exactly,
individually.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure I wrote anything for this one.
That's why they're, I think, so repetitive, is
Yeah.
that they came from different people separately.
So that seems to be one thematic issue, how we address the scoring, how are we defining it? The other issue I noticed again was this one of the notion of feedback, which gets dropped into the fifth item, and then it's implied in the fourth item, fifth and seventh item, I guess, fourth and seventh. I'm having trouble.
We found it really.
Did you find it? Just find it. Yeah.
We labeled in the last one. We
Yeah.
labeled these A, B, C, D,
Thank
so
you.
we could always.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so item D and item, do this right, F. It just seems to me that like that's a separate issue from, again, this sort of question of who. Now we've got the what. What's happening with whatever that is? Will faculty be involved in providing genuine feedback? Will faculty and or TT or lecturers be involved in reading submissions and helping candidates to improve their work? It's just for me an issue, like, is that what that's about? The actual specific actions that we're recommending that anyone who's an agent inside that program will be doing, feedback, for example. What do you think?
It would really help if we removed the words professors, faculty, and made it, because in different institutions, that's going to be very different.
Yeah, it means different things.
Yeah, it means entirely different things. You know, I mean, you can, at some universities, you can call anybody faculty.
Yeah, exactly.
Lecturers, if you do that at Stanford, you'll be fired.
So
Not quite,
which
but
they'll
you'll
be
be
like
told off.
support providers, or
Yeah,
we come up with a different.
Well, I think we just list all the possibilities. That could be providers and then whatever the possibilities could be, e.g. ... These could be all sorts of identities. We don't need to worry about which institution has which identity. We just need to make sure we're somewhat exhaustive of the possibilities. And I do want to leave the idea that it could be a coordinator. It could be somebody who's hired to work in that role in some places.
So
But
does
maybe-
this mean, can I just back up for 1 second? So are we defining faculty in terms of, like, if we look at this, it says faculty implementation. So are we just right now trying to define what we mean by faculty?
Or are we just defining who's doing scoring?
Yeah, I think we're just coming up with a listing of the possibilities.
be doing the
of who could
scoring.
be doing the
Okay.
So
scoring.
we reconstruct the category called faculty implementation. We call it scorer.
Or program.
I think it's more than just scoring, though.
Right.
I do too. That's what I meant about the
So
what.
that's why,
You could just say program implementation, couldn't it be?
what is that?
PPP, implementation.
Yeah.
So what was the rationale to put the word faculty in and who did it? And why did it get framed as that? I'm curious.
I think Adam did it. I don't think he's married to it, is that what you said?
Exactly.
I'm looking at the TPA standards, for improving
Mhm.
and it says somewhere down here, all approved models must include a local scoring option in which the assessors of candidate responses are California program faculty and or other individuals identified by the program who meet the model sponsors assessor selection criteria.
Good.
Local assessors are trained and calibrated by the model sponsor. The scoring work is facilitated. Their scoring results are facilitated and reviewed by the model sponsor. Detailed plan for establishing and maintaining accuracy, iterative reliability. Model sponsor demonstrate. Blah, 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 blah.
Does that local mean California local, or does it mean?
It says
program?
California.
So, yeah, so it's not program specific, local.
And then one more thing it says about it. Model sponsor must provide an annual audit process that documents that local scoring outcomes are consistent and reliable within the model for candidates across the range of programs using local scoring. So it makes it sound as if the program sponsors, CTC, Pearson, and Fresno, have to have this system set up for local scoring, but the institutions can use it or not.
Yes.
So that's, because I'm thinking about, in our last group, one of our recommendations was, let's look at what standards are already in place and seeing, are they being enforced or not? So this kind of sounds like there's nothing that says an institution has to use California assessors. Pearson can hire people from wherever they want. But they could use it. There is an option for it. So do we want the programs to have to use local scoring?
There may have been drift from policy, but when I was in 2016 sitting in this room talking about Cal TPA, it was specifically stated that Pearson would ensure that only California-based scores were employed. Is that drifted? That was my remember of the representation. I don't remember it. In fact, I remember the specific concern was what happens when somebody from another state with no experience in California is hired by Pearson? And the answer was that won't happen. So local scores, I thought, meant drawn from a pool of California expert scores, whatever that means.
This just says that
Bigger
the
than that?
sponsor or
Yeah,
those three
could be
people
Pearson or-
have to provide a local scoring option.
Wow,
And the
option.
programs that elect to use that option, blah, 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 blah. So it's like they have to figure out a system for it. Now, I would think that the thing about you have to be from California would
Or
have
had
to be
experience
in the
teaching the
contract-
California
would
system.
have to be in the contract with Pearson.
Yeah.
Not the standards, but I wonder if it is. And because I don't
There's
know.
a lot of flexibility
It's
right there
even-
for
but
policy.
it's even in their application to be an assessor, that you are a California resident, you have to be a California resident.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay,
So
so using the term local scoring, is it just generic that means California, or are we talking about
Site-based.
site-based,
I think
exactly?
that's my
Site
interpretation of
affiliated in
that
some
term.
way.
It has to be the site.
From what
Right.
we heard from our previous group, it's all about site-based. It's
Yeah.
absolutely to get out of the hands of a abstract score who sits with 15
Yeah.
portfolio or 15 TPAs to score. It's your institution is scoring like packed. It's back to pack.
Right, and you'd think, like, you look at the Fresno model that's so strong, with using their own faculty, their own people, that everybody would want that. Everyone would want the scoring to be done by their own people.
But no one did.
And so why is that?
Why is that?
Why is that?
Because faculty, staff and lecturers knew how onerous it was doing pact.
Right,
And none of them wanted to carry on doing that and said.
especially in the really big programs with hundreds of candidates.
I
at
mean,
the
I can
same
tell you
time.
for us, it was time, money, capacity, there was just too
So
much.
when someone else said they were going to do it, everyone went, yay.
Let-
And now everyone's going, no.
Let me offer a different theory of who the bad guy is. It's not a bad guy. It's more of a question of institutional priority. I do think that deans across various colleges of education, certainly in the public and to some extent probably private, have tried to figure out how to spend resources. And with limited resources and shrinking budgets, which I think Beverly, you know a lot about, you actually do have deans making decisions about what their priorities are for their college. And if their priority is not to add extra funding out of tuition, FTE, into into TPA, then it doesn't happen. So I've watched deans change their positions on the degree to which they can and will support parts of this process. And I don't blame it on the deans either, because they go back to what are they trying to address in terms of budget crunch. So I think the problem is who does the scoring, not just for ideological or personal or professional reasons, but also structurally, how do colleges pay for faculty release time, staff point to positions?
Well, it makes me think too, okay, so if the student pays $300 and it goes to, let's say, it goes to Pearson or it goes to the CTC as two of the big sponsors, those people, not the institutions, are paying the scorers
Yes.
out of that $300.
You would take the money back to them.
So if an
Exactly.
institution
Exactly.
is using their own faculty, don't they get a piece of that 300 back to pay the scorer?
But they don't now because they're being externally scored.
But
But if they were internally scored, you would bring that money right back. You'd say that's part
So
of paying
so
for
that's where the money would come from. It would just
change the
be,
model.
so it wouldn't be a financial drain on the institution. It would
Zero
just
out.
be.
You could.
Yeah.
And I think the big burden would be two things. One, in big programs, it's just hard to get that many people to do it because it's a real time consuming thing. But second, especially at the public universities, faculty are all represented. You can't add things to their workload without an agreement. You can't just say, now you have to do this. And so.
Yeah, don't tell us to the volunteerism of San Jose State faculty, which often goes around what it probably should be doing with contract. But I would say this to your point. We did have a lot of methods faculty invested in the PACT who were scoring their
yeah.
own local PACts, not because they were, as professors, shocked by the requirement, but rather they were already bought in to, these are my phase 1, phase 2 students.
You're at San Jose?
At San Jose, I see these students all the time, and why wouldn't I want to score them versus somebody from a more distal place? So it's weird how the culture of different institutions.
Well, and San Jose was kind of an outlier in that because you had one of the PAC leaders, Andrea, at your campus, who, I'm sure was a big cheerleader for it, got people more involved, more,
I was there then too, and so was Mark Feldman, a lot of really good
One of the
people.
other CSU campuses, it was just something that the UC was doing, and they saw it as alien,
So I'm not trying to go to historical walk, how I remember the world, but I am saying this, I do think that it actually works when you say, if local scoring means either site-based and or California scores, if it's site-based, there would be a recommendation for what purpose, like what would be the rationale for why we would want FAST model or PACT models to go back into place.
Right.
Juliet, do you have any good rationales for us about why we would want?
Because everybody talks about it, so what's the benefit?
Yeah, I
What,
mean, that's-
Because
that's the purpose of doing
programs
it.
get firsthand look at what their candidates are doing. And yeah, and what you said, I think that's the biggest one. Programs get a firsthand look at what their candidates are doing. I think faculty benefit from seeing what candidates actually retain from what is taught.
And what they struggle with.
Yeah, and what they struggle with.
And it probably isn't an issue so much about the candidate, you know, about the scorer knows the candidates
Yeah,
or
right,
not.
right.
It's not that. It's not about a benefit to the candidate. I think this
About the
local
benefit
scoring
for the
is
program.
all about benefit to the program. And so if we come at
Sorry, say that again,
Yeah.
so they get better.
the desire to make local scoring, and I'm using that local as
Yeah,
as
thank you. Institutional scoring. Yeah,
affiliated.
that's what we need to, we need to
Right.
clarify that.
So if we all agree that we want something that says institutional affiliated scoring has to take place, then we have to talk.
It's not
what's the
benefit, no,
It benefits the program. It
Doesn't it, doesn't it really benefit the student?
I think it's both.
well, I don't know if that's actually a fair argument, because if it's an objective scoring process, the scorer shouldn't know whose assessment they are scoring.
That's the way we did it in PACT, but
And knowing
we
that
don't need.
shouldn't help the student.
I would actually, yeah. I mean, just based on some struggles we are having right now with BEST, I think it's important to keep scoring in the institution, but not necessarily scored by somebody who directly knows the student.
Do you do it now? Is it someone who knows the students that does it
For
now?
our first cycle, which was our site visitation project, yes, it is. And I'm seeing some problems with that. I just
Yeah.
had a big conversation yesterday about it.
You get into where it
Yeah.
has the danger
You
of
have
being
too
not
many-
objective. You
Right,
you
and-
think, well, I know what they meant to do, or I know what
Exactly.
they did the other day.
One of those one of the scorers saying, you know what? And I so appreciate this. She said, I need somebody else to score this one because I fear that I'll be too biased. But I don't think that everybody does that.
We allow that bias in every other measure that we make.
Very
Every
true.
Single.
Very
course that
true.
They do, every other piece of work they
Every
do.
clinical practice evaluation.
But that's why this is meant to be objective. That was one of the whole purpose
Why?
of putting in TPA, about accreditation, about assuring program quality, that every other part of accreditation is all input based. It's the programs telling the state, here's what we do, here's how we address the standards, here's whatever. But there was no output measure. There was nothing that said, okay, you say you're doing a good job. Now let us look at your candidates and see if they're really qualified. That was the purpose of it, was about public accountability. So if you don't make this an objective measure, you lose that.
So can I come from this from a different angle? One of the things that's gonna go on with these recommendations is that we talked about yesterday, is they're gonna blend and bleed into other recommendations, and some of them are gonna be contradictory. Some of them are gonna be in tension with one
That's what I
another.
said yesterday.
So that's what you said. So I'll give you the concrete example. For formative feedback to be more than formative in nature, in other words, window dressing to cover whatever we do, but actually to have implementation, visible practices, you can see feedback occurring in program. There has to be a degree of contact between the instructor or the observer and the actual candidate or the respondent, the person doing the work. This whole day of objective, subjective, I think begs a fundamental question. To what extent, for our other recommendations regarding the formative redesign of this TPA, can we really allow people not to be directly involved in supporting the candidate through their judgments about these three next steps need to be in place? If in the next iteration I see those things in place, then we've made progress. Now you're ready to release and go and actually submit it for the TPA. The whole idea of intersubjective judgment is going to be baked into anything called formative. If it's going to be formative, it's going to have problems that are different than the objective measures problem.
Except it's sort of limited by how you define formative. If you only think of TPA as formative as if it informs the learning process up to it, then yeah, it needs to be chunked out and embedded in the program. But if you think of the TPA as formative for lifelong learning, that learning doesn't stop when they finish their program and take the TPA, so it's summative, but instead at that point it informs their ILP, their career, it goes on. Then it is formative, even if
That's where the tension rests, I'm just suggesting right
it's
now.
like, where do we?
Because a lot of us in the other group are not sticking with that second point. They're going to the first point.
Right.
To make this thing actually useful, it's got to stop playing the game of being a summative with a lot of window dressing. It's got to be embedded, task-based, and there's got to be information exchanges and cycles of feedback.
Maybe.
And you're saying maybe, and others are saying yes, and so here we are too. That's where it's going to collide a little bit around objectivity, reliability, validity, but it's also going to transcend, I think, some of those technical problems. It's going to go to, is this thing about candidates finally getting the feedback they need to improve? Or is it more like, I can't touch it, that's yours?
But that's the assumption that this is their only opportunity for feedback. They're getting feedback from faculty and supervisors all throughout their program. This is not the one opportunity for feedback. They're getting feedback from their very first field experience.
Well, it's the one high stakes example, and also transfer is assumed in the model that it moves from other places and they get the feedback and then they suddenly apply it to the lesson planning route or lesson planning template, or that they design a rubric. Like this is.
I think they get tons of feedback. I mean, on this particular thing, again, if you look at it as the purpose of the TPA is to inform what the candidate gets all through the program, that's one type of feedback. If you look at the TPA as a point of saying, are you ready at a beginning step to begin a career on your own? And this informs the rest of your career development. That's another kind of feedback. But
Wouldn't that be the program's responsibility anyway, not the TPA?
well, that's sort of where my group last time had the recommendation about, we need to look at the existing regulations and see how they're not enforced, because there's an existing regulation that says it's the program's responsibility to take TPA results, hold on to them forever, and transmit them with the candidate to where the candidate goes and is employed, so they can use them as part of induction.
No,
Nobody does
we're
that.
not allowed to do that.
It's in the standards. We've looked it up and read it.
We're not allowed to do it. We cannot pass it. We've been told not to pass
Yeah,
on.
but it is in the standard that's.
Well, yeah, I mean.
And
I
maybe
think we're
it's
getting away
put on
from
the candidate.
what we're supposed to be
We're-
doing here, but
Yeah.
this is one of the things that kind of frustrated me with our previous group. And it's hard for me to think outside of what we're currently doing, in my institution, because we actually use, and it's my responsibility to do this as TPA coordinator, the TPA results. So the candidates don't finalize their induction plan until they have their TPA results. And we have an induction program that our campus runs that naturally aligns those things. So it's just a natural alignment. So wherever they score low in their TPA results gets addressed on their,
Priority for.
That's in there.
Most of
Right,
you
idea.
go into your induction program,
it depends on what's easier for them.
and if their district even offers it, yeah.
Well, I mean, but it's still, it goes on their induction plan,
Yeah.
regardless of where
Wherever they go.
So their TPA results.
I mean, that's not something that.
Well, you don't get the score on there.
No, we just say
No,
that
there's
this
a
area is where your
paragraph.
deficit.
These are the things you need to work on.
Yeah, that's, I think.
You don't
that's
say that you
the
only got
intent,
one.
But that was the intent, but I don't think it.
I don't think that happens
Very many
either.
places.
Well, that's, I mean,
So
is
do
that
we
something we
change
can
this
talk about?
faculty implementation title?
I changed it to program implementation.
Okay,
I don't know,
I mean, that's fine, because Adam do these together, so.
Yeah.
And we're flexible.
And another interesting use that I think I remember was early on in PACT, and I think in Cal TPA we tried and then we sort of lost it. The institutional energy around using the scores to look at overall performance across all candidates and ask the question. And I don't, I write about formative assessment, so I'm never gonna let people call this formative, but I'll call it formative for the purposes of our group. It could be formative for our faculty and coordinators to say, hey, we're really weak in assessment for learning, standard 5. And here I am teaching that course saying, how are we weak in that? I know exactly how much feedback and how many artifacts and how many aligned tasks there are with the Cal TPA or the TPA. What's going on with the disconnect here? That was
data for continuous improvement.
so there's a continuous improvement data point. So you could say, I guess, in a way that faculty implementation or program implementation includes use of the data to look for patterns and trends in performance. But again, the burden of that is faculty motivated to put that on the agenda and getting support to do it from their department and from their dean.
To be honest
That
about, okay,
falls
our
away over
program
time.
shows a weak point in this, and you teach that, like, it's like.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I wonder, having upcoming, I guess after lunch, is a presentation about accreditation.
That
I
should be part
wonder
of the
if that
evaluation.
program improvement piece, because I believe that's in accreditation standards.
Yep.
Will be addressed about how TPA aggregate results by the institution are addressed in program improvement and accreditation. Because I think it exists in the standard, but I
It's in
don't
the
think
common
it happens
standards.
everywhere. Yeah.
So maybe a recommendation from this group could be back to the model of the future, which is, hey, let's get back to looking at that programmatic data across the various tasks and TPEs and say, where are we still struggling with candidates overall, not just individuals who didn't pass, but actually where are the trends? Trend analysis.
Right,
It's
strengths.
like we're not strengths and weaknesses. What are we doing well? What can we do more? Those conversations, I can tell you, for the last 4 years, have not occurred anywhere near our department. So there's been a complete disconnect now. So I want to pick that point too. The problem with the assumptions of us giving recommendations is that the theory of action is we somehow move people by doing the things we say. I don't know if I believe that we change tenure track hiring processes or lecture pool hiring processes. People are not being asked in their job descriptions, to my knowledge, from when I've sat on committees for search, to actually do anything with TPA. They're not being, your job is to teach the following things on your academic assignment, and that includes evaluating, scoring, describing, talking about student TPA results and or work.
And that's where it has to be.
So we have a massive structural disconnect now in the big CSU system, I think. Maybe some programs are doing better jobs than others.
And yes, definitely, because when I came aboard, and I think it resonated because I was a new set of eyes. Everyone who had been there had been doing, in their rote activities over and over and over again. And so I brought in a different perspective. And everyone bought into the idea that the TPAs are important. What can we do as faculty, because they're going through our classes? How can we help along the way prepare them? They didn't look at it, and I didn't pitch it as something additional to do. It was, here's an idea, here's a concept. Okay, the TPAs are raw about this whole funds of knowledge and cultural linguistic resources. What does that mean? How does that work for your class? Can you address this in your class in the regular instruction? And they're like,
And connect it to TPA tasks.
yes. And they were like, yeah, we can do that. That's easy. And so everyone bought in, and it wasn't an additional heavy load. So when we're thinking about implementing, these TPA components and concepts, I think it just really goes to how do the faculty value these?
And that's a problem.
Do they value this process?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick reminder, if there is a recommendation that doesn't belong, or you feel like it's in the wrong place, it can be transferred, or it could just be left to the to be considered bucket.
Eliminate videos and have supervising faculty review the lessons included in the TPA. That sounds like one that we could eliminate, because it doesn't make any sense in this particular.
Thank you.
test.
I mean, not eliminate it, just hold it out, hold it separate.
To another space.
Don't try to, I guess, integrate it
Yeah.
inauthentically.
Well,
Can I just say I started taking notes and I just put it up there.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
well, maybe we should, oh, you did them as,
Look, I just add a few things that
Hmm.
people maybe think a lot about. So one of the things that we've been talking about is embedding this work in the courses.
Hmm.
Yep.
If it actually is part of the course, whatever this EdTPA, whatever the performance assessment ends up looking like, if it is related to a course and embedded in courses, then the assignment itself can be scored by the person teaching that course,
yes.
because it would be their coursework.
Yep.
It just replaces something that they would be doing at the end, something more summative at the end or whatever.
I heard that's what Stanford Step does. Is that true? Are you all still doing that? That you actually really do embed in your courses things that are really close to the EdTPA, such that a student could be getting feedback on
From
that task,
from
so
the
close to the one
instructor
they're
of
gonna
that
turn in.
course.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
close to the one they're gonna turn in.
Yes.
And that was for us.
But
a wall.
not in
We never
every
did that.
subject, not in every subject
Yeah.
area,
Yeah,
but certainly in
Yeah.
the majority of their subject areas. So for example, our math cohort, it's very, their whole CNI course in the 10 weeks beginning January is geared around developing 3 lessons, blah, blah, blah.
assessment activities embedded in
Bring a
that.
video in to show your colleagues and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. But it's not scored in that way. I mean, there's no scoring of it.
that's such a good idea to make the actual assignments, reflect what they're going to be assessed on. In the CSU and probably other places too, what we run up against is the very tightly held concept that curriculum belongs to the faculty and academic freedom. And dictating to faculty, you have to put this into your course, as, you know, this is one of your assignments. Now, we famously had an executive vice chancellor years ago who told our academic senate, there is no academic freedom in a licensed profession. And which, when you think about it, like, it got a lot of resistance, but then it ended up being like, you know, he has a point. Like,
Sure.
it's a licensed
Sure.
profession.
I'm
There
glad
is-
that you used the AF word, because I was gonna use it, but you did it for me. Thank you.
But, you know, that is the resistance.
And
it's
that's
not-
the tension in the CSU for
It's the
sure.
tension, well, it is the tension at the UCs, it's the tension at privates.
You also have to remember,
Faculty
we had,
don't want to be told what
so-
their freedom is.
so we had Linda Darling Hammond standing up,
Telling everybody.
telling everybody that, you know, if you're not happy with this as an assessment, come back to us and talk to us about
Exactly.
why this is not
Exactly. Why it doesn't work.
educative for
Right.
your
Right.
courses.
Right.
And I virtually everything that's in there, the objectives of everything in EdTPA is actually solid, what we
Yeah.
want our candidates to do and know. And so most faculty went, oh, this
an
helps
authentic
me
assessment.
this helps me structure my course. I now have a structure that I didn't have before, and that's fine, that's great, this is helpful. But it's not taught by that many faculty
Yeah,
as
and
well.
we would get pushback, not even necessarily by the faculty that it affected. We'd get
No, by
pushback
others.
by the statewide academic
Oh, yeah.
senate from professors from entirely different disciplines who just wanted to object on the principle of it, you know, that it wasn't even their.
This is teaching to the test,
So,
and they just spout
Or
that.
just, no, we just don't want the state telling us what's in our classes. Even though it's not my class, it's somebody else's class, but.
I'm glad we said that out loud, and I think we probably now have to figure out too, where are we on recommendations? How much time do we have? Do
We
we,
actually still have 35 minutes or 34.
35 minutes? Okay.
34 minutes.
I think,
So, and I just was trying to capture some things as we were talking about them, so I'm
Yeah.
definitely up for,
in your third one there, as a way to learn more specifically about candidates and programs, areas of strength and areas for growth.
Yeah.
oh, right, okay, yeah.
And curriculum, really.
Printed as a way to learn more specific candidates and programs.
Could you
Another,
address that in number 2?
Well, it's all connected, right?
Yeah, it's all
the same, requiring programs to engage in scoring their candidate submissions as a way, as a way to learn more specifically about the programs. It doesn't need to be just.
I wonder if whenever we end up here needs to start a preamble that reflects what we just talked about that we're defining what everyone in the group is using as local scoring. We're defining that as
Institution.
institutionally affiliated scoring.
I don't know why affiliated. What do you
Well,
mean?
because it's not necessarily faculty, it could be.
No, but that's what I mean by
So
institution.
I have that a little bit, yeah.
You do?
Okay.
Well, not really. I called it site program-based
But
scoring,
I don't even
Yeah.
know if you, well, cite because,
institution-based.
Yeah.
I get you.
but that's how we're defining local scoring is based with
Yeah.
the institution.
The institution.
And also that we agree that there's a merit to this. Like, why do we care about that? Well, it's because of, you know,
Can we go back to that bullet point, the one that you were working on? So I think another thing to add, and this is kind of a hot potato, it could be dangerous, but it allows
You
for.
go there, go on.
I always do. I don't give a crap anymore. I think that it could be an exercise in curriculum review and alignment.
Mhm.
So I think another bullet point that needs to be pulled down past program strengths and areas for growth, we need to say, and curriculum review for alignment and support for TPA.
Okay.
So I think it's another bullet. You only want one bullet per?
No. I'm trying to think if that actually belongs.
Is that
Would
is
that
that
be?
necessary?
I feel like it feels more like that program, because I have programs use the data from the TPA to engage in programmatic continuous
Yes,
improvement,
including curriculum.
Okay, very good.
including, yeah,
Curriculum review for alignment.
review.
And I hate to be so specific with TPA cycles and tasks. Because the idea again is these are cycles and they're tasks, and there's a lot going on there for students who
Yeah.
need.
And so this
Yeah.
is necessary because what's my rationale here?
To create more coherence and consistency in student candidate experience. As they move.
It
towards
also
the
stops
TPA.
I mean, one of the things that they were arguing about from the beginning, it reduces the duplicity.
Yes,
Because-
It reduces duplicity.
coherence,
Currently,
consistency and reduction of duplicity.
candidates
Yeah.
And I put coherence there too, because that
It is,
coherence
yeah.
problem is huge.
It is.
Many programs not aligned.
Not yet, let's be positive.
Well, I'm saying this is, but we're saying why.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
currently, that's just what's going on.
okay, fair enough.
Not aligned with GPA tasks. Well, faculty do not. Well, I don't know.
Maybe deficit.
I want to
Yeah,
be
okay.
positive too. I want to say may not be aligned.
Yeah.
Because some places they are.
Okay,
They are, and I think we're actually really well aligned. I think I want to go back and say, I also want to be careful. There's the hidden curriculum, there's the visible curriculum, there's what we know about our faculty and what everybody does. I don't know what half my faculty friends do, nor that they know what I do necessarily. We don't all look at each other's curriculum. But I can say this, I do think there are institutions, to go to your May point, that are actually working to say, hey, lesson planning is a consistent feature. Assessment design is a consistent feature. It happens in many parts of our coursework. So in theory, it shouldn't be duplicative as much as multiple tries to practice to then go on to do it for the final summative experience, which is called TPA. Unfortunately, there is also some wastage, like how many times do we need to do a lesson plan in each course we teach? And we've seen that problem as well.
Well, we also have to think.
We can't lay that on the TPA
I
as my
bet you
point.
most programs are actually very well aligned because look at the pass rates. You know,
Right.
it's sort of like we're addressing a problem that doesn't exist as a huge thing. If we've got pass rates where the lowest are 96%, except for the few outliers, I mean, they probably are pretty well aligned with preparing candidates
I
for
would
that.
disagree.
Yeah, I
because-
was
I would
gonna-
disagree because I think, at least in my communications with some of my colleagues around, they're crossing that line over what's considered acceptable and unacceptable support. I know for a fact that many people are basically coaching their candidates specifically for the TPA to increase those pass rates. Doesn't mean the programs are aligned with anything. It just means
Mhm.
we want you to pass this. We're going to do whatever it takes to get you to pass this. And so these are some things we're going to do.
How do you define like the over the line coaching? Because for a TPA, for me, teaching to the test would be a good thing. If we've said, these are the things that beginning teachers need to know and be able to do, I want to teach you how to do those. So, but
CTC outlines, I'm sure you know, they
Right.
outlines those, what's
Yeah.
acceptable, what is unacceptable. One of the
Yes.
things that's considered unacceptable is giving candidates like
Direct
examples
feedback.
or direct feedback and looking at their material. Those things are
different than.
frowned upon. They're not supposed to be done at all.
Right.
But I
Same in
guarantee you, I
TPA,
can
and
promise-
Yeah, every
It's
TPA.
not-
Yeah, it's everything. I can
I
promise
think
you
it's
that-
actually nonsense to have some of
Right,
that guy.
yeah.
I mean, and the same, at the same token, I know other, it's happening, so I'm just gonna be transparent. People who structure their video segments. They guide, they prep their candidates, they prep their students, and they're saying, this is what you want to do, and so they pretty much,
Orchestrate.
orchestrate.
We had
So they can
earlier
pass.
conversations about programs need to have TPA prep sessions, like as part of what they do. And so the guidelines for those would have to be really carefully enforced.
So I want to support Devin though
That's the
from.
line you're talking about.
Yeah, and so,
I think Devin's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's not.
it then comes down to an equity issue around
Right,
how much support do you give when you've got 500 candidates as against 40 or 60
Right.
candidates?
yeah.
How can you give that support? I actually think that the guidance on the support that we give is absolute nonsense. Everything that you want to be able to do in giving guidance is sort of hampered by those rules that they say you shouldn't do this. You
Well,
can only
that's-
give guidance by asking them questions and things like that. That's the sort of thing that EdTPA says, ask them questions about it. Why did you choose this? Is this a good idea to choose this?
Well, let's
Yeah.
write a recommendation
Yeah.
about this whole guidance issue about.
Because I see nothing wrong. If a student of mine has, and I would never do this, and no one in our place would do it. If a student shows me an hour of their clip, this is them teaching. And I turn around and say, I think that those minutes there are spot on for EdTPA. I haven't changed their teaching. I haven't changed All I've done is change, I've guided their choice
Of
of
what they're gonna
what they're gonna
submit.
submit to show, to meet the demand of something external, right? It's not, I mean, I haven't gone in and said, okay, go back and reteach
Yeah.
this, you know,
And do this
and do this,
specific
this
move,
and
yeah.
this.
Address this in
Right?
your
Yeah.
No,
reflection, yeah.
yeah, you know, I'm just helping them choose that. Same as if they're responding to a prompt and it's all over the place. I'm going, you need to rewrite this prompt, you know, why don't you start with something around this and then do some of that? So you're guiding their writing, right? Which is something that lets a lot of them down. We're sort of told that we're not allowed to do that. Yeah. Right?
Well, I could see guiding their writing as being problematic. I don't see telling them which part of the video to use.
Why is guiding their writing, when it's said that they're writing NTPA and Count TPA, the quality of their writing should never impinge on their score.
I don't mean about the quality of their writing, I mean about their reflection about their teaching. Like if you're telling them what to say and what to address and what to whatever.
Oh, no, yeah, no, they have to choose
Yeah.
what to do, you know, what they're gonna reflect on, what they think they, you know, they come up with all that. But when they've got that, I see nothing wrong with supporting them, particularly if they're a multi-language learner and stuff. You know, why wouldn't we support them in structuring it?
Right.
Can we say that we recommend that programs, I have to type as I'm saying, this, programs be allowed to provide candidates feedback
Yeah, feedback.
on their submissions?
Yes, I think
Or
so.
on their work prior to submission?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, I think you're gonna have to, if you're gonna go that way, you gotta make it stronger and not just allow them to do it. You
Okay.
have to require
Right,
them to do it
programs
because you
be-
wanna have the same experience.
same experience.
You don't want some programs saying, well, we're allowed to, or we will, and others saying, well, we don't have to, so we won't.
Right.
If it's available to some candidates, it should be available to everybody.
Because
Candidates. Right now, they're not allowed.
Yeah.
candidates need formative feedback.
Yeah.
This
Before they
recommend-
submit.
So part of the recommendation is that the current guidelines for candidate feedback need to be reexamined to make the feedback meaningful and helpful
Current.
without sort of tainting
It's
the.
the-
And
it's not
just
the-
in
it's not-
time.
It's the current guidelines for acceptable support is what it's called.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So it's. yeah.
Be revised.
Well, examined and revised to make it.
Examine to
Without-
require
To
to.
allow for the whole process to be more educative and formative and educative throughout the, you know, whatever it is.
Process, I can't type.
It's hard to type publicly where every
You're doing great,
mistake
Juliet.
is out there.
Appreciate you.
Awesome.
Thank you, you're right, she's good.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in a group, wherever she goes next time, I'm gonna be in a group.
Can I just?
You're gonna have some
No,
fan
you need
stuff
a- you
going
need a
on
D
now.
on examined.
This may be too much in the weeds and too micro, but I do think one of the challenges with the storytelling around feedback could be, I'm gonna wait in my program until the last moment because my students are gonna wait until the last moment, and we're gonna put everything together 2 weeks before instead of, let's say, the night before. And 2 weeks before, there's gonna be a program requirement that I get feedback from somebody or some persons that I can respond to in that 2 week pre-period before I submit and hit that button and go final. And I think that's a little bit missing the spirit, right? That's like teaching to the test and playing a game. That's
Yeah.
gaming it. What we should be saying is programs throughout each cycle and task development are providing feedback that is directly building towards this thing called the final product. I'm worried
Yeah.
that we're just gonna put feedback in a pre-mode of 2 weeks in advance.
Well, and they need to submit their recommendations about embedding and chunking the TPA so that it's in.
Yeah.
But that's in the other group, the,
Incremental feedback.
That's connecting to the other group.
yeah, the
connecting synergistically.
scaffolding and
Yeah.
sequence.
Right.
Yeah.
Recommendation that I'm.
So, so why don't we say scaffolding and sequencing of feedback is an important element of this process. I don't know how it gets worded, but it's something about scaffolding and sequencing feedback processes. Not again, just the idea of just feedback at the last moment.
Yeah.
Scaffolding and
And sequence.
sequencing
Feedback
feedback.
on their work throughout the.
There we
process
go.
prior to
That
submission.
helps me. Does the group feel that's okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know,
Should
Beverly.
this be a separate recommendation?
I think it might be.
In the other group, the formative nature group, we were talking about this idea of how are we going to if we don't, some people are saying let's redesign all these TPAs as if we had money, time, and effort to redesign all the TPAs. We don't. But we could say, why isn't this more of a portfolio method? We have lots of evidence about the value of portfolios that are even scored intersubjectively with moderation. That's a little loosey-goosey, right? In the sense that, why are we saying that people can only put up one cycle on their evidence of planning, evidence of enactment, evidence of reflecting? Why don't we say they can put up a chunk of lesson plans that they've either taught or implemented in their program, let's call it their phase one student teaching, and they could reflect on those.
They can.
That could be their evidence,
Well, our
rather than the evidence that's so tightly constrained by by EdTPA and CalTPA, which really locksteps them into a cycle of inquiry. Right? Do you get my point? There's a big difference between saying to somebody in your first semester, we want to see evidence of growth on lesson planning and the way in which you understand your lessons when they fail, when they work, when they don't, and then let you do that over every single course and then push that up into your portfolio. Here's my lesson planning skills. And that's part of the CalTPA currently, rather than I've got to do one cycle that's connected over 3 weeks. So I just want to push back on the design problem here is that we're trying to work within a structure that's forcing people into a 2 to 3 week cycle
I think that
versus a
that does
programmatic
allow-
experience.
And programs
TPA.
can do that because that allows flexibility. And I've asked that question to the CTC and Pearson reps. Can our candidates use lesson plans or video clips from lessons taught previous semesters?
And reflect on them.
They said yes. So our candidates do that. So they do develop, not necessarily a portfolio, but they do have a collection of video recorded lessons. They do have a collection of lesson plans. They do have, a collection of
Assessment
information.
rubrics and
All of
assessment
this
data
stuff
they use to
that
make decisions.
yes,
Yeah.
we were told that, they can use
But
that.
for
So
but
NTPA,
not
they
for
have to
TPA.
be linked.
No, it has to be linked. Yeah. So it's
They have
CalTPA.
to be the same. I mean, that's one of the reasons we chose it, and one of the things I don't like about CalTPA is that it's not a unified sequence of teaching and learning.
Different argument with you about that one.
Yeah,
Why we
yeah,
chose
yeah,
to go
yeah,
that way
but
versus
anyway.
TPA.
Yeah, but they can do it from whenever they like. There could be something that they did in December, and they submit it in April, or it could be something that they've done in February and they submit it but they can choose it from whenever they like. But it has to be connected in TPA.
And TPA.
They have to be, the lesson plans have to be the video of a lesson that
Yeah, I mean,
is
but it's the same
videoed,
thing.
and the assessment has to be within those lesson
Yeah,
plans.
they are.
But
I mean,
for
because-
Cal TPA, they're not, are they?
No, they do. They have to be.
No, it's
No,
not the same.
you can break, you have a plan, yeah, they're two separate cycle events, and the idea is that in
You
either of
can
those
do the
cycles, you're
planning.
still pulling in the lesson plan, you still gotta show evidence that you have a
Yeah,
connection
yeah,
to the
but-
assessment, but
But
it's
it's
different.
not those lesson
Yeah.
plans, it's
So just all I was saying was, I don't wanna reinvent the TPAs, and some of them are gonna be reinvented, but what I'm just wondering is, we have decided as a collective here that portfolios are not really the way to get at it. It's more a cycle of inquiry that connects the things, and we need to see evidence of the connections as much as we do of the artifacts and task responses. It's seen that the how do you plan, how do you enact, how do you reflect? That's in certainly, I think, all the cycles. So what I'm just wondering is if we let that all go, we're back to the same problem, which is a lot of people are seeing this as an end of program event. They're not, because they're being told you've got to force this into a connected experience. And you can't do it in first semester, second semester, and third semester. Right? Whereas in our program, we can say second semester, you can do CalTPA cycle 1, and third semester, you can do CalTPA cycle 2. Even if that's the wrong model, the point is we're not allowing people to grow over time and show their practice of growth. What we're saying instead is show us your best practice at the end of your program.
Well, and I think part of that too is because it was intended as, the threshold to practice, the threshold to being teacher of record. And it's measuring competence in the TPEs, which are beginning teacher skills, and how much of those are legitimately accessible earlier in the preparation program. Like, have candidates mastered enough of the TPEs early on is it fair to chunk them early so that?
You're back to scope and sequence problems. You might be able to do in the first semester a lot, but only with 1 or 2 TPEs. You
Right,
can't do with all of them.
Yeah, and so it's like, how do you appropriately figure out what is fair to assess them when they've only been in the program 6 weeks? You know, and maybe things are so interconnected that they have to be assessed together at some, you know, it's like.
Yeah. Validity is related to opportunity to learn. If you don't have the opportunity to learn, then how are you going to show what you know and can do? And so how do you sequence it? But I guess I say that not as pie in the sky. I really say, I think developmentally, when we talk about continua, the problem we have is we're not actually assessing and validating the growth piece because we want to see threshold versus, hey, I don't even know what a question is to a student because I've never asked a question except, are you on task? Or are you to the bathroom? I mean, there is that level of the beginning teacher. But we don't want to start assessing really for reals until we know they got more than that.
Well, and if the other purpose is not just to make sure the candidate is ready, but to make sure the program is preparing students.
Yeah.
Well, they have to experience the program. They, you know, you can't look at the program outcomes if you're assessing students when they're only a third of the way through it.
You wouldn't give the law bar exam to somebody in their first year of law school.
Right.
You wait till they finished all 3 years.
But is it fair to compare this with the bar?
Well, I don't think they care about lawyer development the way we care about teacher development, right? So our whole thing is about development, progress, growth. Their thing is more like.
Exactly, theirs is
And-
definitely a summative.
And they also,
And
and
we're
they
trying to
also
argue
have
for more of
a
a
much more thinkable field of practice where they can
Right.
say, we're talking contract law here, we're
Right, right,
talking family law, we're, you know, where
right.
ours is all.
Concrete knowledge.
But it's also more similar to being a doctor.
Mhm.
Yeah, where things are
or a
integrated,
nurse.
exactly.
So it's integrated and you have to do your residency before someone, blah, blah, you know, I mean,
Right.
it's more performance oriented
Yeah,
that way rather than a lawyer.
But they don't have a standardized
So where are we at
practice
4?
assessment.
Are we at 4
Well,
now?
I have 4 here, I mean, just to review what we have.
The other ones are kind of included in those.
Are they?
Yeah, programs engage in scoring their own candidates' TPAs. Necessary because decontextualized centralized scoring allows programs to not engage with the quality of candidate submissions. Local scorers have better knowledge of the specific context in which the candidates are teaching. Address this by requiring programs to engage in scoring their candidates as a way to learn more specifically about the program's areas of strength and areas for growth. I do feel like that bleeds some into this next one. Recommends that programs use the data from the TPA to engage in programmatic continuous improvement, including curriculum
Review.
review for alignment with TPA cycles and tasks.
That's drilling down. It's good.
Okay, recommendation is necessary because TPAs provide authentic data on what candidates have learned and are able to apply in their teaching. I don't know, if that's a statement I wrote, you could.
Sorry, could I just interrupt there?
Yeah.
Because
Sure.
maybe something from what we put in the session on the equity should be in there because it gives a direct. I mean, one of the issues that was raised, not for FAST, but for the other two, is the disproportionality of results.
Mm,
So I think we need to pull that straight out
Okay, so how should
To
I?
address equity.
to address equity and disproportionality.
I would ask the question, do TPAs provide authentic data?
I was wondering, if people were gonna- yeah, I had some concerns as I was writing that.
Maybe do you just take out the authentic?
Yeah, I think just take the word authentic out and let it be about
They do provide data.
proportionality.
Yeah.
Provide data, okay,
Provide data. It is a data point.
in results.
Yeah.
Okay, many programs may not be aligned with TPA tasks. Candidates experience duplicity in coursework and TPA tasks.
Mhm.
Or many, I
Wait, duplicity, is that the right word?
don't know,
Duplication.
duplication.
Yeah.
Duplicity
Duplicity
means.
is different, something else, yeah.
Yes, yes, it
Yeah,
does.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It is, that's
Very
better.
different than
Yes, yes, thank you,
duplicity.
thank you.
And again, just on that one,
It
just
might be that though as well.
Yeah.
It could well be.
But that's a whole other
Duplicitous.
recommendation.
Yeah.
to lay our program experience on the line here, I do think that we hear this not just about TPA. So one of the interesting things is how we conflate the critiques of our candidates. We tend to think of this as, oh, that's a TPA problem because a lot of surveys tell us is actually, if you ask the same people in a completer program, end of program survey, how did you feel about our coursework in this program? They will tell you again and again, it was repetitive and duplicative because in their mind as a novice, learning to write a lesson plan from four
Yeah.
different perspectives,
Right.
meaning language learner perspective,
All that,
assessment.
yeah.
It's all just repeating the same stuff. So
Right.
here again is, there's a misconception and preconception from the candidate, but it doesn't just apply to TPA. So I want to like not worry too much about duplicative.
Yes, I.
They don't know
Could
what.
I
they
delete
don't
I
know.
think that
It's
statement
been
the first
said
day
in,
when
Yeah.
I
sorry.
tried to, no, I made
Yeah.
that same statement the first day because I was confused on what the complaint was or what the
Mhm.
pushback was on.
From the survey results we
nature of-
saw.
Right.
But they do say that, but.
And they say it across multiple
They don't
places.
know what they don't know.
Yeah, that's for
They
sure.
don't know that they need to learn lesson planning more than once in a different context, in a different area. You know, it's like, it's not just you learn it.
Imagine a doctor saying that I had to do so many rounds and repeat the same procedure, which
Right.
is so dumb because everybody knows this procedure, but it's a protocol.
Right.
Like, yeah, so
Yeah.
So should I delete that?
Yeah, let's delete
I,
it.
well, it addresses the concerns of the
Well, that's what we
survey.
were asked to address it.
Yeah.
So-
Does it say it in these?
Well, maybe it's.
Yeah,
I actually don't see it in
It
here.
doesn't say it in these, but it
But,
says in
yeah.
almost
But
everything.
maybe instead of
We
saying.
were asked to, it
Right.
said, that was part of our brief, was to reduce.
Guys,
Okay, wait,
maybe
let's try to
instead
talk.
of saying that they experience this, maybe as many candidates express.
Express.
that they
Yeah.
experience it. So it's like, we're not validating that it is
That's
duplicative.
a good
We're
change.
validating that they say that.
Coursework and TPA tasks are duplicative.
Seem duplicative.
Seem.
They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, okay. So implementation is intended to address this by requiring programs to directly engage with the data on their candidate submissions. Okay.
All right, 3.
Boy, this has turned into some good stuff from.
Programs, okay, recommendation 3, programs be required to provide candidates scaffolded and sequenced feedback on their work throughout the process prior to submission. Recommendation is necessary because candidates need formative feedback prior to submission.
Well, we could actually add a little bit that, need formative feedback on various tasks. I mean, again, with the components of the complex thing called the TPA. So how would we say that? Tasks, components, or tasks?
Expectations.
Now, looking at these two, I actually do think 3 and 4 should be combined. Because if we're saying that we need to look at the current guidelines, let's back up to what 3 says about
No, I
they
agree, it's the
they
same.
have to do it. And then let's just put a comma in there with current guidelines being examined and revised to ensure blah, blah, blah.
I think it's a sub bullet though.
Yeah, I mean, that.
Yeah, but something that says, you know, they have to do this and in this context.
From current candidates need formative feedback on
And by the way, that's another misconception in my own work that I think I really struggle with. We reproduce it. It's not formative feedback on the task for the task's sake. It's to have an opportunity to reflect on what the underlying goals are, what the underlying habits of mind are, what the underlying dispositions and standard-based practices are. Like, that's the thing that you need the feedback to get to. You don't just like improve and tweak the task. You know, Jim Popham would tell you that's a ridiculous view of assessment, that you're just manipulating the task. You know,
Be
you're
better on the task.
you're thinking more about
be
what are
better or
what are the
it's to be
habits,
better
what are
as
the
a teacher.
skills, what are the
Yeah.
reflective practitioner, whatever those things are.
Okay, so I.
So how to say that, I'm not quite sure, but
Reflect on and grow from.
Grow.
When you finish that, could you back up and I just want to understand how that sub point relates to the first
Okay.
recommendation.
Yep. Well, let's finish this if that's okay.
Yeah,
first.
oh, that's
Maybe
just
not
a-
grow from, reflect on and develop.
reflect on and develop. We don't like to say knowledge, skills, and dispositions anymore, but whatever,
We'll just won't say anything, but just develop
develop.
in general.
Thanks for the support on
Yeah.
that one. Old school thinking.
Prior to submission?
Prior to resubmission. Oh, no, we're talking about submission. Yeah.
Initial submission.
Yeah, initial submission, I think that's good. Initial is great because it allows.
Have you come in to tell us about the 7.0 earthquake?
Did you?
I saw that. I thought it was
showing
the
them
6.
The.
7.0.
My thing says it was a
First
6.
Humboldt.
By Humboldt.
Oh my gosh.
That's
The
the tsunami.
the
Was moving?
microphones and everything were like moving. I wasn't. I was gonna tell you that you had till 11:45.
Oh,
Great,
Okay.
rocking and rolling. See, fine, we have another half hour.
Yeah,
That's a tsunami.
So build in all of your breaks.
Time.
I'm ready to present.
Whitecap said it was a
So it's
6.0.
come ready to present at 11:45.
Okay.
I don't know.
A huge difference.
Well, my
between
wife.
six and seven.
It's huge, 7,
Exponential.
My Whitecap says 6, but.
where?
So Devin, where were
Like
you
off the
stuck again?
coast.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
back.
on the off the
Where were you
coast.
stuck again?
No, I think it's off the, no, no, but what I'm saying, it was 7.0 off the.
Oh, okay,
off the
so.
coast.
Yeah.
So it's,
I mean,
by the time it hit the coast, it was
That
6.
alone, I guarantee you.
Let's see what that says now.
These guys are like Trump squirrels, like the moment the squirrel goes, it's called an earthquake. They're gone.
Yeah.
So I think if you
guy,
take like,
it's like, what's up with this?
The estimate of damage
Have you
to
been through an
poorly
earthquake?
made buildings.
Okay,
Okay, well, that's good.
sorry.
Have you been through an earthquake like a California earthquake?
Yeah.
89?
No, not in 89, but there was one little tremor thing.
Oh.
It was 90 or something. We've been here a couple of years, 1990, 92, something. 90, sorry, 2000, 2002, something like that.
Just south of Eureka.
Okay. There was one when we were in
You're just like, hey, Northridge, bring it on. I can take whatever.
quite a few people up there.
All right, so I just kind of back to business for a second. Devin was pointing out the current guidelines.
Yes. Are we okay first with this? Candidates need formative feedback on the various components of the test in order to reflect on and develop prior to submission.
Their practice.
Let's
Their
take that on
practice,
record.
yeah,
Take
that's-
on there too, in order to reflect.
Reflect and develop, okay. Develop, I like that, then practice, prior.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so programs be required.
Less is better.
So you want to take out practice? That's what you were arguing that.
No, I'm in that camp with you. I happen to believe practice is the whole concept, but,
But there's more to it. We went, not just their practice, we went their understanding, so that's why we said take it all out and just develop, just.
so we would have developed what as an answer to the problem right now? Like
Yeah,
develop,
the praxis would.
praxis,
cover-
practice.
Yeah,
And
we
I
cover
think-
everything.
Praxis is definitely, calling back to other
That's-
Yeah.
registers of
Yeah.
language.
There we go.
Yeah,
Now we sound fancy.
Yep.
It's not just to do.
Theory and
Practice,
practice.
praxis.
Yep, yep.
It's not just to do it so that they do better on the test.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. Okay, so,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm okay with that. I was just thinking, just because that's a bullet point, I think if that was a recommendation in and of itself, I
Which it was.
I
We moved it.
guarantee. I know, I see how it fits, but I know that alone I'm almost positive would guarantee the improvement of results in TPA,
Well, and-
because
Yes.
so should we
providers are
move it?
limited.
Well,
No, I mean,
I
I
wouldn't
think
make
it
it,
fits.
that's why I don't think it's a sub-bullet. I think it's part of that recommendation.
Yeah, I think it can go either
Plus
way. I'm
the
happy.
English in me says you can't have one sub-bullet.
Uh,
But I think it's part of the recommendation. Programs are required, blah, 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 on the prior to submission and current guidelines.
I think it's part of the recommendation. But you're right, I think that if they redid that advice on what permissible
Yeah,
guidance is, if they redid that and made it much more focused on formative feedback prior to sending it off, not doing it for them,
Right.
but actually, structuring it and guiding.
Absolutely.
they required it.
Yeah,
That's
I
optional.
mean, I think the disproportionality would be cut in half at a stroke.
okay, so I'm gonna eliminate everything we had for 4, because I don't think that's necessary.
Jumped it up, yeah.
Okay.
And then, is that our last one?
Yeah,
Cause I wanna
we
go,
only have 3.
okay, I wanna go back to the first one for a second. We're programs engaged in scoring their candidates TPAs.
Right.
Engage is a real mushy word.
Programs.
It
score.
could be, well, we have to figure out not only what it's gonna make a requirement that they do it and to what extent, but we also have to figure some programs aren't gonna be able to do this, like what's feasible?
We've got
What's-
Department of, we got County Office of Education all around this table, not just,
Yeah. But-
universities.
Right, because we defined it as sort of institutionally affiliated or institution or whatever, but and you can't put in stuff like to the extent possible, because then they'll say, well, we're doing
It's not
2% and that's all we could do,
I think the other part there, Beverly, is we actually know for a fact that if there's a consortium, let's say, I'll just make up, if there's a consortium of UCs that decide that they want to do a TPA, they are not necessarily going to say that Davis only scores Davis's candidates. They might say, no, actually, the consortia develops a framework for
Right.
cross-scoring and
Which
cross-fertilizing,
they've done that, yeah.
which has been done even in packed in the past. So the idea is it's not just their own candidates, because they could also score on a sister campus's candidates, or
Let's
no? Do we
Let's
not
get
want to do
back
that?
Let's get back to again, why we think it's important for them to score their own. Because if it's a consortium, then it's not their own. They might as well be anywhere in California.
No,
So do we really think that the programs have to score their own?
they understand the results.
Right, and so
Let's stick with what we have here. I just want to point out that could be a model for some developing TPA thinkers.
because there is a new one under,
Because
you talked to Ray Pichon? He's
I'm on text right now.
he's leading up another.
Yeah, it's being recorded. So,
So
yeah.
this is an option because the CTC does offer the option of institution-based scoring,
Yeah.
in-house scoring,
But nobody does it.
but nobody, well, and all you have to do is, but they just said it's at the expense of the institution to cover the calibration process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's there. So I'm just wondering, how do we, I mean, what are we really at?
See, I think if in this room and in our bigger room, everybody agrees that it's good for a program to score their own, then there must be a reason that they're not. And if money isn't it, because they would get the kickback of the $300, there must be a reason. So we can't just mandate it and they have to figure it out. Why aren't they doing it now? If we all agree it's a good thing.
Unless monies were appropriated through this recommendation process to support a certain number of
But if they
providers, I
get-
doubt
but
it.
if They get a share of the $300 for scoring. Like right now, Pearson uses part of that $300 to pay a scorer. So whoever the scorer is, part of that 300 covers it. So it's not money. It's something else that prevents programs from scoring their own. And whether it's
I
workload.
think
I
it's
think
time.
it has a lot to do with time, because the calibration process
Right.
is pretty
And
rigorous.
also turnover of
Has to
faculty.
do the calibration, still.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we had
That
one,
process is rigorous.
as far as I know, only one person on our staff, lecturers, faculty, has ever tried to become a scorer for a TPA. And she's super experienced and she didn't pass the calibration.
Ah!
Goodness.
Like she spent forever
Yeah.
trying to do it. And we talked a lot about it, and it's misalignment in what she believes and what they were showing.
That's why I stuck with it.
And yeah, you're right. But it took a lot of. Oh, did you try to do it?
No, I went through the process, but like I said, I mentioned in, last meeting
Yeah.
that I stopped because the direction was, let's identify the problematic areas. Let's find ways to fail.
Let's find the errors. Yeah.
And it just didn't sit right with me. And it just seemed like an immoral
Yeah.
process.
And I think that was the
I
problem.
was like,
with
I'm not
her.
going to be a part of this.
But we were all encouraged by our faculty sponsor person who runs it all to, he wanted me to do it. And I said, over my dead body, I'm not doing that. There's no way. I've been the NTPA coordinator. There's no way I'm going to score NTPAs.
So how do programs get around this? If they don't have staff, faculty, whoever, who are willing to do it, even though they get paid, we just say you have
Well,
to. How do they?
Isn't that a question of political lobbying? How many deans come to how many meetings? You know this better than all of us. You've tried to move deans in directions. I remember back on the Common Core. So what do we need? Foundation money to move the system, to say, let's get together and start talking more and more as administrators of our buildings, that you all need to be valuing TPA more than you currently do as deans of our colleges?
Yeah.
Right, or as administrators of XYZ.
So did it when you guys were in PACT? I mean, we would use, I feel sure that if we do go to local scoring, it'll be the same structure that we had in PACT, which was not faculty, not even lecturers, it was our supervisors, because we saw this as a measure of clinical practice.
And that's what actually happens with FAST.
So going back to PACT.
Are the supervisors.
And we call them faculty because it's the clinical practice course.
Yeah,
But
I would
that's
like
a
to call them
definite- yes,
faculty,
right,
but I would
right.
get in trouble if I did.
So.
But yeah, but that's who that's who we will use without doubt.
I would like to have more of our.
And our only debate is in PACT, we didn't allow, because we were told not to, supervisors to score their own supervisees. So we mixed them all up and I allocated out the different people, so it was scored by a supervisor that knows them, for goodness sake, of course
Yes,
they
yes,
do.
yes, yes.
But, you know, it's, but they
directly
weren't
working.
actually the ones doing the work. And I've changed my mind. I think it's, why not trust them
Yeah.
to be as objective as anybody else doing that work, and to do what your colleague said, I really don't think I can do this one.
Yeah.
And then I go in and do it,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Or it's assigned to somebody else.
Maybe we don't have to figure out the answer, but maybe we put this in a way recognizing that there's a reason it's not happening now. And so some exploration has to be done to figure out how to make
Is the recommendation?
The recommendation could be to
About-
explore, yeah.
recommend that programs score their own candidates, but it's kind of like, okay, why aren't they doing that now? Like, what are the barriers to programs scoring their own candidates?
So,
Yeah.
This is the desirable outcome.
To explore what the barriers, blah, blah, blah.
Barriers, yeah.
to explore, isn't it prior to this, we have to
No,
explore?
we went before the priors. We went, what are the barriers to programs scoring their own candidates TPA? And how can we make this happen? Like, you know, it's,
So, I'm sorry.
or
Where should I put it?
well, so if our recommendation reads something like, we recommend that makes it hard for this problem because that's not where I want to go. It's like programs scoring their own candidates TPA is important and valuable to
Identifying resources necessary to X.
Mhm.
Is that part of the
Right.
recommendation? We
Well,
recommend that they
identifying
identify
barriers
resources,
and resources.
barriers.
Yeah, barriers and resources.
Barriers and resources necessary.
Barriers and needed resources
To enable.
Yeah.
to enable this to happen.
I'm sorry that I like the word engage. I use it too much. To score their own.
Locally.
Yeah,
I'm happy with that.
yeah.
Hmm.
I just felt we need to do something to say, because it seems like everybody agrees it's a good thing.
Yeah,
So
but I
why-
think you're right.
Why isn't
Why
it
isn't
happening?
anybody doing it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna take it back.
And that is potentially something that.
We come back to-
We can't do anything, we can't do anything without you now, so.
What were you saying?
I said that is potentially something that after we do all this work in a year from now, a foundation or two, they look, we now understand that to get this thing moving again, like we did with the pact, and I can already imagine the name of the person who knows where these resources are. We need to revitalize that by starting with what are the barriers, what are the necessary resources, and what are some of the models to make this work? And we might have to gather as a state to figure that out. Because remember, PAC was all about putting people in the same room once a year for a while.
Mhm.
We lost all that. If we're gonna come back to a more engaged, formative, educative XYZ, I think we need to get back together. And that may require a little bit of a bump to get us back together for a while. And then we go back to our own and figure it out.
And it started like that. I mean, I
Yeah.
thoroughly used to enjoy the EdTPA meetings and the national
Yeah.
stuff and going to
Yeah.
the conferences and people presenting how they're delivering it.
Yeah.
I
And,
love the pack
and,
meetings.
and they all died. I mean, I mean, it's like, and I think it was before COVID did it stop, or maybe it was COVID that put,
No, it was before.
I think it was before COVID because everybody was doing their own thing and everyone thought it was okay.
And you were at least on a national road show. We
Yeah.
were here at California, it's Cal TPA, where we had nobody got together or said we should get together, talk about Fullerton does versus San Jose.
Model.
Like, nobody cared. It was like, whatever.
Model had lots of meetings.
Yeah.
It did, and
it did.
TPA did too at the national level.
Yeah.
So in other words, let's jumpstart it and get back to that. So in other words, if we make a recommendation, let's think about what would
Well,
be the long.
maybe
run.
that's another bullet point under that. Is that
Really?
is is that if we are going to this, if we are going to have local scoring done in institutions, then there needs to be some cross fertilization of ideas. There needs to be
Moderation, calibration, and
Yeah.
cross fertilization.
Yeah, I was going to even ask about the moderation piece because
Yeah.
What you're
that's
saying
one of the pieces. Sorry.
also makes me think of sort of a recommitment. It sounds whatever, but to the concept of TPA, of why we wanted it in the first place, what it was meant to accomplish. Because now there's so much negative about it. We need to sort of believe that it's a good thing, that it's valuable, that it adds value to candidates and to programs, and sort of recommitting that it's a good thing before we can get everybody excited about
Because I do think, for example, us as TPA coordinators, I think it would have, if I was the state, one of the things I would want to know is that all of us coordinators understand the processes and that there is some calibration between what's
Yeah.
going on in your place and my place.
Yeah.
And that other people are coming in as well with all of that, so that there is some calibration
So
around what
Julie,
is happening.
We had a third bullet point, which is going to Colin's point right now. We actually had a third one we're thinking about, which is something about moderation, calibration, and chance and opportunities to interact with other program,
Cross-fertilization.
fertilizing other program insights, blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
But it's something about moderation and calibration too. There's got to be that with the
say-
cross-fertilization.
And it's not just,
It's not an opportunity, program to be required to engage.
it's
Yeah.
cross models,
Statewide.
not so much cross program, but it's at TPA,
Moderation,
Cal TPA, fast.
calibration, and then whatever. So I just want to make sure that gets in there.
I just think every time I see the word.
So Beverly, no,
required, I
that's what you were adding, Beverly. I think
just
now
think
it's
of our
just,
faculty is like that word is so aggressive and it just turns people off.
We just say programs,
Required.
programs.
Opportunity, but then I figured that,
not programs be required. It's rather that they have an opportunity to
What if you
participate.
say programs
Programs
should?
participate.
participate.
Yeah.
Yeah, just say participate.
Thank you. And statewide
Okay.
moderation, calibration, and
I was
cross-fertilization
gonna, yeah,
of what works, in quotes, what works, what's working well.
okay.
And by the way, we're gonna have to calibrate the feedback because this idea of feedback magically descending upon institutions and getting done well. No, you have to train and think and conceptualize. What do you mean by feedback? Where do you want it to happen? Because a faculty, I say this is praise. Good job, Devin. I think you did a great job on task one. And then this guy comes over and says, excuse me, we're gonna need 20 minutes to work through. And I'm not just gonna tell you you look good. I'm gonna tell you that I want you to think about this, this, and this. Right there's two messages coming straight out of the program. One person's easy, another person's harsh. One person doesn't really do a whole lot of hard work and feedback, another one's kind of lazy with it. So I do think getting together helps us to talk about.
So you think
What's
something
working?
in addition to or beyond like the Meredith Fellows?
I was thinking about that, the
Because
implementation.
Meredith
conference.
I've
Fellows.
seen that all the time and there's a lot of other coordinators, faculty, people who
The
are involved.
implementation conference
Yeah.
that's done by the CTC each year.
Meredith,
RTP.
yeah, passed away.
Don't know what that is.
It happens, it's on Zoom now. It's
Is it
usually.
just for,
September.
it's just for count?
No,
No,
it's
it's
not.
open to everyone, open to
It
anyone.
isn't.
That might be a good place to start us.
Valuable for fast, because it's so different, but
So
yeah.
we might be able to start any venues and spaces. But I think that the concept is there, participate in something that is connecting us. So good. Are we good on that one?
But
Okay.
the only other bit to it is that if there is local scoring, then is there going to be some sampling of that
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the state? Is there a sampling process that other people are saying, okay, we're going to look at a random 10%. We're
Just like
going
they
to
do in
choose your
Queensland.
candidates,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
which is what it was in the UK as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
Is that, you know,
So that's exactly.
schools like high schools wanted
Yeah.
to take over all of the curriculum, all the assessment. Great, you can do that.
But there's
So
moderation.
we're going to take 10%
Okay.
and see if that
But that's actually what moderation in the Australian context and UK context kind of means. Like
Means, yeah.
psychometrically, that's what it means. So I think we're fine with it. I don't think we need to re-wordsmith it.
Okay, no, I think it's fine.
Moderation
We're-
literally implies everything you've said and we can
that
expand
there
it.
is some moderation, some sampling and moderation
We're
of,
not gonna specify it yet.
because, I mean, if I was on the state board, I would want that. I want, suddenly, I want to know to make sure that everybody is on the same page and we're really,
That probably helps
Because I
people.
didn't take
The
that.
word
from
moderation.
Now I
Like
understand.
drinking in
what
moderation may have been the first thought that people have, right?
Moderation means, so this.
Sampling, fine. And calibration is really setting exemplars. It's deciding what a 2 is and what a 3 is and a 4 is. That's all that really means. Just, hey, this is what a really good
Making sure we
Jewish
agree
thing
with
looks
that.
like.
Yeah.
But I think the cross-fertilizing of the what works is more of getting back to us having a chance to dialogue rather than just be audited. So auditing is not what we're recommending only. We're recommending collaborative discussion.
yeah, because, and that's what I mean by the moderation. The moderation isn't that you're suddenly going to change some institution's score and then say, you know, you score, but you are going to have a conversation. It did seem that with your science candidates,
Yeah.
whoever was scoring those, they seem to have missed blah, blah, blah. There seems to be something that, but That's expensive for the state to do, but
Do we need something on that one about the statewide moderation that's saying who's setting this up? Who's like to tell a program you have to participate? That means I have to call around and find out who wants
Yeah,
to
right.
meet with me or whatever? Or should it be, the state
Led by.
needs
the
to
state or
sponsor,
the
like
CTC?
By sponsor.
sponsors
Yeah.
these,
And again, the money can be found if there's a decision that it matters to
Or-
save the TPA.
Julia, you can insert it there.
And they need to come up with-
CTC sponsored statewide moderation.
And they need to come up with a process of doing that, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, are you moderated every year? Are you moderated every
Yeah,
3 years?
there's ways to design.
To begin with, everyone's moderated, but then it lasts for 3 years and then someone
And
comes
again,
back.
there are psychometric methodological ways to do it so that you can draw inferences out of the statistics. So again, I don't think that's a problem for us. Like, we don't have to think that far
No,
ahead.
we
We
don't,
just have
no.
to know,
So
Look, we need
if
to-
we add 2 words in there, programs participate in annual statewide moderation. How
again, I think that's too much
Like-
micromanaging
Yeah.
of the challenge. I
Like,
think
that-
we're recommending
Does it mean
today
it happens
something
once?
very general.
And I like CTC
Shall we?
sponsored statewide moderation, yeah, sampling.
How about
Yeah.
Ongoing, yeah, again, let's just,
Yeah.
we're killing
So
it.
it's not just one time, that's what.
Yeah. Okay, are we down to 3? Third one is good still, or we have 4? Was there 4, but we don't have, I saw,
We moved 4 into 3.
we were 4 to 3, okay.
Yeah, we.
Goodness.
I just,
Language
that's my template.
Do you need to delete the recommendation 4 or you keep?
It's a template in case we have one.
So,
Well, is
yeah,
there anything on this page that we want to address that
That
we
we
haven't?
no.
A seminar support, like, we have seminars, we have program coordinators who run wonderful things. We've got online stuff, we've got asynchronous, synchronous. So I don't know, like, do we need to say across the system, a seminar to support? I mean,
Which one are you?
I'm sorry, the C,
Mhm.
because it seems to me that almost every program would have a seminar or online or asynchronous resources. Like, that seemed to me to be something we could address, but we could also say, is it too nitpicky to raise it? You're asking what's missing. I think what's missing is we haven't addressed that. Like, how
Is there-
nitpicky do we
Is
get?
there a current program standard that requires that?
Program standard 1.5, what is program
About
standard
candidate
1.5?
support?
Yeah, we have that in here.
Is there a program that doesn't provide?
That's what I'm sort of trying to say.
I mean,
One
I
would
thought
assume
all
that they wouldn't,
programs-
Oh, there's all the
Provided some-
acceptable support.
they wouldn't pass their accreditation.
Maybe that's a good question as to accreditation. What are the accreditation requirements for
Right, that's what I
program
meant, like,
TPA
what's the standard
support?
For that, so hopefully we're gonna get that.
We'll get to that, so we're okay with not addressing.
And it's interesting that the 2 things are there, because you might find that there's support for candidates' clinical practice, but not support for, the 2 things are just.
Contemplated, yeah, they're
Yeah.
distinct.
Yeah, they just think you could have one without the other.
Formative opportunities.
Yeah, I sort of think sociologically, if you just think of this as we're losing commitment to this because we've lost opportunities to engage.
That's what
Yeah.
last time said.
It's not just the candidates are fatigued. I think the providers are fatigued.
Instead of throwing everything.
And that
out
comes
there,
through to the candidates.
Guidelines. of-
Right? If there was
I think there needs-
energetic support from all the folks who are burned out, we wouldn't probably feel people feel like they're just going through motions.
Well, also, I think
Or
there needs to
re-energize.
be kind of a stronger push to, I don't think, force collaboration. One reason I bring this up is because when I first started
Mhm.
in this work, I reached out to a lot of institutions, a lot of people who were doing this work before me. And it was almost as if, "No, this is my thing. I can't share this information with you. This is what,
Interesting.
you're gonna have to figure this out on your own."
We need
And
to-
yeah,
we need to
it
change
bothered
that
me so
frame.
much
Yeah,
that I
that's
was like,
gotta-
okay, that's how we're
Yeah.
working here. And
That's-
so it was just really frustrating and pretty much starting from scratch and developing it because I didn't get, I think there was one person at Cal State Chico State, who reached out and responded, and was like, yeah, I'll meet with you and we can talk about what we do, which we need to revise, but.
Yeah.
You should have an annual or semi-annual forum to gather.
Yeah,
talk.
but I mean, yeah.
Or
So
go on
it was-
Zoom or
it was
whatever
like
you're gonna
pulling
do.
teeth to try to get
Yeah.
any information.
Yeah, that's good
I
to
wonder
know.
who funded the ATPA national one? Pearson. I don't think Pearson funded it.
Yeah.
They did.
And PACT was of course funded by a foundation, so.
It was what foundation funded
You
that?
just dial up your friends. They know.
Are we able to, we good with these? Shall I?
Overestimated my friends.
No, I'm good. I'm great with those.
We don't want to start tinkering.
No.
No, how it's we be here all day.
Sharon.
Thank you, Julianne.
Yeah,
Someone
thanks.
had invest.
It helps me.
Or somebody else.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we
I
can
will
do
We're
the same.
really being
Yeah.
selfish.
I will be taking off shortly